All right, my friend Taylor Black. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Amish. We need to spend more time together.
We
It's
do
hard being busy.
we do live like half a mile to a mile apart from each other. Yet we don't see each other as much as we should. Maybe now that wine season has approached, we can
There we
start
go.
double clicking into that. But
Yeah, we
we're,
should do it for our dogs.
exactly, yeah, dude, he's not getting out enough right now. Um, Well, thanks for joining. I know you're super busy these days. Apparently, lots is going on in technology and in the world. So apparently, of course, you're in the center of a lot of this. Um, but just to kind of preface what we do here, um, this is really a conversation with the people in our network. We've cultivated this network of over 200 folks around the world, and we continue to grow. We like to think of it as like the builders behind the scenes, turning the gears of innovation. And so I get to talk to you all the time. I've got to talk to you for years. You're a big part of what Conduit is, and both in spirit and in structure. But I'd love to share your story because I always refer people to you of like, you got to talk to Taylor. Taylor's got such an interesting career journey, and you continue to find yourself at the intersection of things that are not obvious for innovators to be at. And I think that's an interesting topic to talk about today. I know we could talk about lots of things. So we have hours and hours and hours, and we'll do multiple of these. But I thought we'd kick off with having you introduce yourself to the Conduit community. And, where did little Taylor Black come from? And how did he get to grow this amazing beard that he has today?
Yeah. Well, dude, well, thanks for having me on, and honestly, thanks for cultivating this awesome community. I think community is one of the things that uh, probably just one of the top three things that has ever driven my career in any way, shape, or form. Is people who build community and are really intentional about that. And community is hard. Doesn't just happen. It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of head work, and a lot of leg work. And I'm grateful for you for curating what you have. Yeah, so I'm Taylor Black. I was born in the Seattle area. My mom and dad were both at University of Washington when I was born. My dad double degreed in engineering and economics, and my mom double majored in music and English. She principaled in harp, violin, and piano because she's kind of a musical prodigy on that score. Um, and they're fantastic. I was able to spend some time with them over the holidays.
Nice.
It's always good there. Yeah, so born and raised here. I was my dad went to law school in Chicago after they graduated, and when we moved back here, we moved out to kind of the Maple Valley area, and that's where I grew up, kind of bopping around the woods and forests of the Pacific Northwest. I'm the oldest of 11, so I had a lot of
Yep.
community kind of built into the family structure, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Being homeschooled really allowed the pursuit of wherever I wanted to take my line of inquiry, particularly with such supportive parents and the breadth of disciplines. I think really opened up that line of inquiry to the world is your oyster. Go pursue it in whatever form you find. The majority of if I think about half my siblings have graduate degrees in various things now too, everything from English to philosophy, law, engineering, nursing. It's all over the place there. And so I think, in some ways, I'm not unique among my siblings in that sort of wide intellectual pursuit. Um, and I think from a tech and engineering standpoint, it really helped that my dad was an intellectual property attorney. And so he was always, working on these really cool ideas and having these strange and wonderful hardware, software, scientist types in the house and, by the office. I did the Running Start program, which I highly recommend to parents out there. It's a way in Washington of getting your AA while you're in high school. Then I went on to Gonzaga. I started my first two companies while I was in high school. It was a property management service and a babysitter broker service, which
Well,
was great.
being the eldest of 11 might have taught you
Exactly.
the
Yeah, I knew what to look for.
validation and empathy. Yeah, totally.
Gonzaga was great though. Yeah, I was part of the Hogan Entrepreneurial Leadership Program there. It was a cross-disciplinary entrepreneurship program. Gonzaga has a really strong engineering department, but I was in the sciences primarily. I was studied biochem for a number of years there before switching to philosophy and classics. Then I went to Boston for grad school, got a master's in cognitional theory and a law degree. But the thing that you don't quite see in the academic thing is that I was doing startups on the side the whole time. I did a prop tech startup while I was at Gonzaga on a business plan competition. I helped start the new venture lab at Gonzaga. It was really my first venture studio, which became a theme as part of my career accidentally. My first real tech company though was in Boston, where I started a B2B SaaS company while I was in law school with a buddy of mine. We had a web design development agency that sort of started specializing in a particular kind of product for a particular kind of customer, learning management systems before they, the Coursera's of the world sort of absorbed a lot of those. Um, Learned a lot. A lot of our customers are academic, and so we could speak their language as fellow academic nerds. Um, uh, yeah, and grew that and did that instead of practicing law, which I'm forever grateful for. No offense to attorneys, but and that's kind of been the through thread of my early entrepreneurial journey for sure.
So there's a lot of interesting blending there, right? I think that one of the things that's very interesting for younger folks who are getting into like the hardware startup or entrepreneurship or just building physical digital products is you see the people you work around and none of them came from just straight one thing. Like yes, you have your mechanicals and your electricals, but when you look at the folks designing products and building companies in the space, someone like myself, computer scientist with an economics background, right? Like now doing physical things. That's probably the closest adjacent. But Susan, my partner, Conduit, she knows she's a screenwriter, right? Rare plays, and it beats by Dre. So hardware people are naturally in the real world, and I think the greatest teams are people who are mixed in these weird disciplines of just different pathways coming together because it is a discipline of different types of things coming together. I always think orchestrating like a symphonic orchestra. So you went from, first of all, house of 11 kids, homeschooled. You had your own high school. Like, what was the age range in that in general? Like,
Well, yeah, it was a high school of one.
yeah,
I was,
incredible.
yeah, I was the captain of every sport my school offered. Valedictorian. It was amazing. Yeah.
You're on every JV team. But you take that and then a nonlinear kind of educational path, right? You jumped around, you're building startups, entrepreneurship on the side. So you come out of all this, you decide to pick up a law degree along the way. I think that's just what you do, and you continue to strive to learn more and more and more. And so then after this kind of first phase of entrepreneurship, going into post academic life, walk us through now the professional career.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, so I moved back to Seattle after grad school in Boston. Sold my company in 2015. And it went well. We never raised venture, and it was a modest success. No complaints there. But I still had to work. It wasn't like go retire money. So I went into business intelligence, which is kind of what was interesting to me at the very end of that's the startup life. We had really leveraged business intelligence and inbound marketing in particular to drive our funnel. That was a lot of fun. So I worked for a consulting company here in Seattle and worked for a bunch of the big players at Disney, ESPN, T-Mobile. Um, and then I also worked for Intellectual Ventures, which has three funds as part of it. I think most people know the big patent holder fund, but I worked for one of the smaller funds. It was the Invention Science Fund, and they created all their own IP. They would have these things called invention sessions and come up with wild, crazy ideas and prototype them in this massive lab by Bellevue College. Um, uh, and when they reached out and said, "Hey, you want to come turn this mostly licensing based endeavor into a venture studio with us?" I was like, it was kind of a dream come true. Particularly, there was a big piece of this too that revolved around a dear friend and mentor of mine, who actually was the one who reached out. His name is Jerome Hewlett. Uh, he's an incredibly seasoned operation person. He ran global operations from Merrill Lynch at one point in time, and the Invention Science Fund ended up being part of his uh, uh, second career in some ways. But when he reached out, I was early enough in my career and had enough of was still enough full of piss and vinegar that uh, you know I didn't ask for more money. I asked him for which he said he wouldn't give me anyway. I was like, "Hey, I'm early. I've been a solo. I've been in school. I've been an entrepreneur myself, but I haven't really gotten this deep mentorship yet. I want to learn everything you know. And he said, "Well, you're going to regret that, but I follow up on my promises." And so the 5 years I spent at the Invention Science Fund were incredible. The first 2 years were an incredible grind. Like
Yeah.
I learned the hard way multiple times, and Jerome was great enough to kind of see me through. Like I almost got on a performance improvement plan at one point in time because I was still figuring stuff out. Um, uh, but he drove me, and I was thirsty and tried hard, and learned my lesson. And by the end, like he said that I could run operations for any company in the world, and that meant a whole lot to me. And I think that sort of recognizing somebody valuable like that in your ecosystem, and kind of apprenticing to that person. Um, I'm not entirely sure where I got that earlier on in my career, but that was a huge unlock for me, just in terms of making that transition from entrepreneur to somebody who could converse in the corporate world and with a whole variety of different stacks of kinds of people in different industries. Um, and be very efficient and clear eyed about it. Yeah, yeah, it was an amazing experience.
There's something, I don't think I've heard that story before because I get to kind of work with drum right now too. So I'm learning
Yeah.
through this kind of connection of you're connecting us, and now I'm kind of learning more about him and his amazing commercialization like mindset. But like you, I feel like Seattle has a weird place in innovation in America. It always has. It's kind of from the old days. But as a Torontonian, also just coming out here, um, there is a sense of like stewardship in the young talent, and maybe that comes from
Hmm.
I don't like when you tell your story about kind of the solo, getting it done, grinding it, and then going in and learning. I think we have a culture of learning and teaching. I got the same thing when I went to Microsoft, right? There's a set of individuals along my journey of 10 years there that like taught this kid who thought he was going to make all these things like the ropes, right? And
Hmm.
helped us navigate the real world outside of corporate, but also like understanding how to build like complex things and complex organizations. And I think
Hmm.
also why we care about community, because it is a bunch of different types of folks coming together around common theses. So that's kind of interesting to hear. It's kind of the core to conduit as well. Diving even more into that, right? Uh, Invention Science Fund over ish. Um, you made your way over to Microsoft.
Yeah.
What are you
Yeah.
doing? What are you doing there?
Yeah. I couldn't have anticipated it. Invention Science
I
Fund.
left and you show up, and that's how it
Well,
works
so
usually.
somebody has to guide the ship, man.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
no,
exactly.
no, yeah. So Invention Science Fund opted not to raise a fourth fund. It was right during the pandemic, and you really have to be in person to raise the kind of money necessary for big funds like they were anticipating for the fourth fund. So I started winding up operations. But as part of that, a friend of mine who was at Microsoft at the time is like, hey, they're looking for somebody like you in the office of the CTO. And so I reached out to the hiring manager. I had three interviews, and then got the job. And it was very rapid. And they're building in a venture studio in the office of the CTO. And my experience in the New Venture Lab and the academic sort of space back at Gonzaga, my experience building and selling a startup, um, enough biochem in my background to know my way around a lab. And then the Invention Science Fund kind of really, which is of course run by the first CTO of Microsoft, Nathan Myhrvold, really serendipitously set me up well for it. Over the course of 2 years, the first 2 years at Microsoft, we built this internal venture studio that took ideas from a napkin to a functioning business unit inside of the office of the CTO, and then we'd spin them out at roughly a Series A size, so maybe 20 people and a uh, uh, a decent sized budget. Most of them weren't making money by that point in time just because of the intricacies of building out SKUs and transact within an enterprise. um, but man, that operational playbook that I had learned at ISF just stood me in such great stead
Yeah.
inside Microsoft. We blocked and tackled and drove things to completion really quickly. We built a really powerful playbook, and were some of the first incubations that Microsoft's ever had that could transact as soon as they actually exited our incubator into a different business unit because of how hardcore our operational playbook was. We did about 12, 15 or so incubations, depending on how you count the size of an incubation. Um, and then ChatGPT happened. And so we put a lid on top of our incubator. It's still alive. We haven't defunded it, but it's more of a center of excellence at the moment. And all of our incubations, we continued that we're still in the pipeline. We continued through the pipeline, but that center of excellence motion became kind of what I'm spending a lot of my time doing now. Which is how are you incubating? How are you working with ideas and moving them into products across all of Microsoft and the product teams and other incubators and accelerators internally? Um, it's been super, super interesting to see that at scale, for sure, particularly with Microsoft coming up on top, as it were, and being a cool kid on the block again. Uh, you know, maybe since the first time since the '80s or something. But yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I left. You showed up. It was super cool to work there again. You told people you worked there. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been interesting. So I'd love to like dive into two things. I know you don't have that much time today. You get back to, AFIing the world. But you've translated kind of this operational wisdom playbook, your secret sauce. I think part of it is, how do I bring people together in community? How do we take, innovation thinking and process, and then just creativity in general? And you've been fostering, and you tell us more about, you've been fostering a network of corporate innovators. Um, how have you been seeing now outside of Microsoft, a very innovative, kind of priority one innovative company? It's a little bit easier to get people to come along with the evolution of technology and innovation. But you also have been building this network. Can you tell us a little bit more about these other corporate or private equity entities, and how you've been building a network of innovators across all the other domains?
Yeah, totally. Day one at Microsoft, I realized like this is why partially because of my my work at ISF, but I was like, do you want? There's a whole hell of a lot I don't know about the corporate innovation ecosystems, and with the speed with which corporations move is not great, and so I need more shots on goal with regard to learnings. This is the biggest organization I had worked in previously was like 800 people, because I was a contractor at T-Mobile and Disney and ESPN. So I immediately started cold calling, reaching out on LinkedIn to people like me in the innovation space at the C-suite level, um, within the Fortune 1000. Um, I also became an LP in a couple of different funds that worked in B2B, so I could have access to their networks as well. And that wasn't the only reason, of course, for all of this, but that was a major driving force for this. Um, and so I built a group of probably about 70 corporate innovators across the Fortune 1000, a couple of corporate venture capital groups as well, and a couple of venture studios who provided a lot of services to corporations. I'm so bullish on the venture studio model. I can't not have venture studio folks in that mix. Um, and we operated on Chatham House rules, so none of us knew like a whole lot about the companies that we were working for, or really the substance of the projects that we were working on. But what we did spend a lot of time with is, what experiments are you running? How is your innovation ecosystem operating? And so we could talk about shop really quickly and really strongly, and we'd run this on a monthly basis, get these folks together, and we'd have people run experiments and come back and explain their learnings on the experiments. And so all of us were able to experiment much more rapidly because other people were running different kinds of experiments and different kinds of ecosystems. It was a huge unlock for us, and a huge learning mechanism for all of us too. And we've actually taken a hiatus for the last like 9 months, because both myself and my fellow conspirator who were running the thing I adopted a kid, and she got pregnant. So we're working on our primary incubations for a bit now, but I think we're both back in business now, so we're excited to get the gang up and running again. But Yeah, that sort of community feeding back into your own work, and of course providing value to everybody as part of the community. I've lather, rinsed, repeated that a number of different times, and it's just such an unlock.
Yeah, I mean, it's never been done in a way where it's more organic and it's not about consultancy and services. It's about sharing, and it's about like the honesty of it's hard in my organization because, and it's not supposed to be easy. It's like that's the
Yeah,
point, right? And I
yeah,
think this idea of just having kind of like with Conduit, we're like an empathy layer first. Like, hey, did you get your ass kicked building something in the real world and building hardware, corporate or startup level? Well, let's start there and then let's see what we want to do together moving forward. And I think that's similarly what you're doing. I came from corporate innovation as well before, kind of more on the operator side. And you look back and I see what you're doing there, and I'm like, man, it would have been nice, being at Microsoft at that time or Ford or wherever, and have someone else to talk to. And it's not about the products or the competitive NDA stuff. It's how are you doing this in 3 months? How are you getting your team motivated? What does reward systems look like? How do you convince the powers that be to, actually approve the thing that they asked you to do in the first place? That's always the fun one for me.
yeah. Oh, so
Um,
good.
but so I'm excited for that to come back and contribute
Yeah,
however we can. Along this way, AI has happened. You've taken a more role in connecting enterprise and startup world together at Microsoft. But that's also taking you to a very interesting new project you're working on, and I'll let you introduce it, which is more AI's impact in the broader sense of the world, community and faith and religion and society. Can you tell us more about this new amazing thing? I'm just like so excited to be both your friend and colleague and this cool initiative you're going on, which is very new. I've never seen
yeah,
anything like it before.
yeah. No, so a small bit of context as part of the innovation stuff I do. It's in the CTO's office at Microsoft. I also help run our internal AI, ML, and data science peer-reviewed conference community. It's really an innovative structure within Microsoft where it's FTE only, but we run a conference once a month, peer reviewed, highly technical, um, uh, in depth, but cross company. So it involves every org within Microsoft talking about our work at a very deep level, from an almost driving the tech forward sort of perspective. But as part of this work, I kept on bumping into uh, people who were concerned that what we were building was having ramifications on what it means to be human, larger than they could contribute to necessarily in their specific role. Um, very, very interesting to bump into people, especially with my background in cognitive theory, right? Bump into colleagues who are asking what it means to be a human person inside a tech company. That's not the kind of conversation usually happens. Um, and so this, I saw this growing need. As part of this growing need, I was invited to participate in the Builders AI Forum conference in 2024 at the Vatican. It's convened by the Pontifical Academy for the Sciences. As one might imagine from a builders AI conference, it's like how do we build this technology in a way that takes into account all our various understandings of what it means to be human. And I have kids, I have siblings, I love people in my community, and that human question is really important to me. So I participated heavily in that conference, and coming out of that conference, was I was invited by the Catholic University of America to build an institute at their school in Washington D.C. It's interesting. Catholic University of America is the only pontifical university in the United States, which means it can confer degrees from the Vatican, which is a really interesting thing within the Catholic world, which numbers 1.4 billion people globally. But also, they're similar to the kind of like University of Chicago. They are two-thirds graduate students and an R1 research institution, in addition to being a pontifical academy. So it's really interesting intersection between the human person as conceived by Catholicism and and heavy research. So this institute, the Leonum Institute, which refers to our founder at Catholic University of America, which is Leo the 13th, who wrote Rerum Novarum, which is a big encyclical presenting the evolution in Catholic thought as a result of the Industrial Revolution. And Leo the 14th, who of course is our current pope in the Catholic Church, who has started out his pontificate last year, really strongly advocating for a better understanding of how AI as a technology is affecting not only the human person but the planet. Um, and so this institute kind of stands at that interesting tension of this technology is great if it's used well. So what does it mean to use it well?
Yeah.
And so we're doing a whole lot in pedagogy across the university of how do we help our students use this technology to help their human flourishing rather than to stunt it. Um, and part of our pedagogy is building stuff, because as you and I know, like, do you want to learn how something works? Well, get your hands dirty and try to build something with it. Try to solve a problem with it. And so we're also standing up a venture fund and a venture studio associated with this institute and the university, um, which will help us commercialize some of these ventures coming out as well. The interesting third piece that I didn't never anticipated would be a part I'd be a part of, but we're also standing up an open source foundation similar to like the Linux or the Apache foundations to help deepen and codify some of the Catholic worldview analyses of certain kinds of tech.
Oh,
For
cool.
example, yeah, for example, if you're a builder who wants to represent your worldview, um, and say you're Inuit, or say you're you know uh, Hindu, or say you're Catholic, what does it mean for the tech thing that I'm building to be that? Um, and it requires a little bit more than just tech to be able to opine on that score, right? Because there's a whole bunch of human questions that are involved in that, and so we see this kind of ecosystem of the open source foundation, the venture fund and venture studio, and of course the academic institute within the university, as being able to have a virtuous cycle of helping inform each other on the different pieces of this overall set of questions. The best part about it, though, of course, is we're building this whole thing in the open. Because as our conversation has trended, right, the only way you're able to kind of experiment enough to really build something out well here is to learn from everybody else doing it too. And so we hope this setup and our building of it really enriches the ecosystem such that all kinds of worldview representing organizations are set up to be in dialogue with the big tech and governmental forces that be, um, as we drive forward these technologies that kind of hit us at a deeper level of our human flourishing aspects and our cognitive processing and our the nature of work, um, in the coming months and years.
So interesting. Like I'm almost lost for words on how many questions I have in my head of how much, abstract the corpus of the things, the questions you want to go answer, but what a great opportunity for people in that university, in that school, builders, innovators to collaborate on a very interesting vector that AI has brought to us in technology for the first time, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I always innately, there's the human part of thought and reason and emotion, and this thing that is thinking when I see it spin on the thing and reasoning. It's this, the words are interesting to me. What does it mean to reason? What does it mean to have thought? And put out information. And I think today we use AI as a way to generate strategic thought, maybe. Um, but this is a different perspective. And I think hopefully everyone's participating in this. What's going to be interesting is the models that come out, the weights that come out, the application kind of layer stuff that's going to come out of this studio fund, university students, etc., and how they intersect just the core technology vector that's happening right now of build, from robotics to embodied AI to emotion, all these other things that are happening in our world and specifically. So let me know how we can collaborate when you're up and running and ready to go.
Yeah, no, hundred
Because that
percent. What? The way in which we're approaching this too isn't from an abstract point of view. It ends up like your conception of the human person, how cognition actually works, ends up being informing your design principles around what you're building. What are you doing when you're asking a question, or when you decide that you have enough information to answer a question, or all of those different things result directly in design choices around interfaces and model time, like all of that sort of thing. So it's uh, I think it's a really exciting time for builders because you have to understand who you are a little bit more as a result of purely your build work, which is just fascinating.
Yeah, the logic part of it is gone,
Hmm.
right? Like in a world where everything was logical, it was if then else, and it formed the combination of those Lego bricks created function and service. Now we're talking about cognition and thought and reasoning and decision making, and I think that's like an interesting time. I know a lot of people are talking about it, but the fact that this exists and an organization, many, most religious organizations are thought as this slow, behind, not thinking, etc. To have it on the forefront and to have someone like you participate and lead is exciting. It's just more and more and more. This is happening globally, and also it might be a way to bring more global connection together, which is would be nice right now. Um,
Yeah, here for that connection.
exactly. I know we're at time. We could talk about lots of things. We have a little bit of time left, but you got to get back to doing all these amazing things. One of the things that we have a handful of listeners at this point. I don't know, thousands. They all write the same comments to me directly. The last part of everyone always on these podcasts always talks about advice to the folks building right now or entering the workforce. I know it's a hard one to
Yeah.
rationalize. You've been through a nonlinear career progression during multiple waves of the technology kind of era in the 2010s. You're sitting at the forefront of what Microsoft's doing, what's happening in society, what's happening in community and corporate innovation. Any words of wisdom to the folks out there graduating, coming into the workforce, seeing it as a tough time, and any places you think people should be focusing on specifically?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think I have three responses to that. One is uh there's this term thrown around, is probably overused, but kind of the wild, wild west. And I think what is meant by that concretely right now for graduates hitting the workforce is the rule books for design, the rule books for software development, the rule books for even server engineering, and in many ways, a lot of the whole tech stack. um, are historical artifacts right now. And that's great and terrible, right? Because you'll talk to, in fact, I had a fantastic conversation with the former head of design at IBM, and he gestured to his Wallow books behind him on his screen and said, it's good that I know these because it gives me some jumping off points, but they're not really references for me anymore because the world's changed. And so and he said, what I'd like to see is a return to the way design was 20, 30 years ago before there were no design programs at universities and you had to figure it all out yourself. And so that's why it's great and terrible, right? You have to figure it all out yourself a little bit now. And so so that's kind of point number one, is like a lot of us are kind of in the same boat there, although, I guess those of us who still have paychecks are the lucky ones in that fashion. So what does that mean? Then back to the world as your oyster a little bit. And so the two things from a world as your oyster perspective, I would recommend is really getting deep with agent. Most of the AI experiences all of us have had thus far in the last couple of years since the chat GPT drop is in generative AI, whereas it talks to us and we have this little chat interface, and it's all good and wonderful there. The agentic side uh, is landing hard this year. And I've been looking forward to it from a technology standpoint because I see this as a true value prop of AI. Um, but it means that now, in a very, very, very concrete way, it's able to do a lot of what we used to consider work that we would get paid for. And so what this looks like. We're not entirely sure yet. We're landing some agentic marketplaces. We're seeing what sorts of things we're comfortable agents doing on our behalf. Um, but take that to the moon. How many millions or billions of dollars can you generate as an individual because you have a fleet of agents at your hand? And what does it mean to have a fleet of agents at your hand? And understanding that in a very felt sense, so that you have all of these little magic brooms going and doing all the work in the dungeon, like in Fantasia. Um, Figure out what that means for you in a very concrete felt sense now, because that is where everything's going in the future. Third, and this ends up being kind of maybe the silver lining, or the exhortation perhaps that I have here. Yet again, in human history, we have this fantastic opportunity to reimagine the nature of work. Prior to agriculture, we were, you know, hunter gatherer, and that was a tough life. Agriculture made it a little less tough, but still pretty tough. The Industrial Revolution promised us all of this amazing gain, where we would have a different sort of relationship with work. But we kind of squandered that in many ways, and invented 12-hour days and 120-hour weeks or whatever. And that's happened again and again over the times we've come up with technological advances. But what if we took a little bit of the lessons that we learned from the pandemic with regard to how much community, especially neighborly community, matters to us in our human flourishing, along with the uh, uh, possible uh, rework of the nature of work as a result of agents being able to do a chunk of our hours, while still providing a whole lot of value? And what if we made more time for dinner parties and meeting our neighbors and having a cup of coffee with the retiree down the street, or picking your kids up from school a little bit more often yourself, instead of your nanny or something along those lines. Building that connection in, I think, is we have another opportunity of doing that and making work more fun and more interesting. Um, if we reimagine this era as an era of abundance rather than an era of scarcity. So I'm excited about that. And I'm excited for those of us who are relearning what a career is, or just starting out on our careers, to kind of take that as much as we can and strive for that vision of enjoying going to work every day, rather than having to continue to do the 80 hours along with your agents.
I love it. We'll leave it there. But I'm going to preface a conversation for you and I to have either here or offline, or if anyone else listening to this wants to hear it. You sparked a very interesting thought there. And I love anthropological biology and economics and all this other stuff. And it's almost like the way you talk about the eras of technology and how we went from a very local agrarian society and really just tried to normalize that into something that was sustainable and within a nation state. The Industrial Revolution, for one thing, was supposed to make that more nation state efficient, but we leverage it to globalize, right? We leverage it to lay track and build planes, and that era of time, which was like, let's go discover the planet, right? Let's find every inch of it. And then we use the internet to like connect every corner of it with teleco and satellite systems and da da da. And we did that. And now we're seeing the implications of when you layer atop of the connectivity, the ability for people to speak and share and connect and remove boundaries and all this other stuff. And now we're layering an efficiency layer like none other before, which is the agentic side that can crawl that entire infrastructure. So not only the physical infrastructure of the planet, but the digital infrastructure is laid on top of it to connect it, understand it, bring people together, separate us, all these other things. It's a very interesting way to look at like the stack.
Hmm.
As a person who builds tech in the real world, it's a very interesting stack, because when lots of terms are out here, physical, hardware, deep tech, whatever you want to call it, but embodied is the new one or whatever. But if we take that agentic and that embodied concept, and now we're infusing it vertically down that like 200-year stack, oh, wow, this is a very interesting time. And now we're talking about space, and now it's like a whole different kind of 4D, 5D kind of conversation. Maybe that's the one we should have next and bring on a few other folks. But I'll leave it at that, because you spurred the inspiration for the week for sure. I know you got to run, so thank you so much for the chat.
Well, thank you for
let's
having me.
let's go get some wine or some coffee soon. I know you're a whole mile and a half away from me right now, so that's on me. And in the spirit of building community and seeing people in real life, let's use our agentic AI capabilities to create that time for us.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much, Taylor.
Of course. Thank you, Hamish.